Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Now let's look at what is the definition, a more legal definition of startup as per the Government of India. Again, I encourage you to go to the ministry. There is a department. The URL, the link to the website is on this slide, and I suggest you go and look up. Let me share some of the basic information with you. So here's the legal definition of a startup. It's to do with the age, it's to do with the revenue size. It cannot be an existing business or a subsidiary of an existing business. It needs to have some novel process or technology. So there is a proper definition in India and most other countries of what is a startup versus a MSME. As you can see in this slide, and you can go to the website, many startups are coming out of India. In fact, we have one of the largest number of startups in the world after maybe United States or China or Israel or maybe one or two other countries. So look at some of the numbers there. So if you look at the screen, you will find that there are almost 150,000 plus startups which are listed on that website, and you can go and have a look. And several thousand of them have actually got a tax exemption, because if you meet certain criteria, the Government of India, to encourage a startup, gives certain tax benefits. Also look at the number of aspiring entrepreneurs who are on that website, almost 700,000 plus. And I would strongly encourage each of you watching this video to register yourself in that Startup India website and look at all the material that is there. Trust me, it will help you start your own business, if not today, maybe tomorrow or the day after. So now again, to clarify, what's the difference between a technology startup versus a normal MSME? Obviously, the first thing is that startups are working to solve problems which has not been solved before. So millions of people, crores of people, billions of people may have that problem which has not been solved. And therefore, startups have a huge growth orientation versus a micro business. A micro business, maybe you are probably the 1,000th micro business, or maybe the 100,000 micro business. Maybe there are 100,000, 50,000, 10,000 businesses like you already, like kirana stores or restaurants or salons or small units. There are many like you. But a startup by definition is something which is new. And therefore, the innovation aspect of a startup is very, very high, because end of the day, if you form a restaurant, it may be a very new restaurant, but more or less is probably similar in many ways to existing or hundreds of existing or thousands of existing restaurants. Think about Google when it started, or Facebook, or Uber, or Flipkart, or Make My Trip, Book My Show. These are all startups. But when they started, there was nothing like them. And therefore, they scaled very fast. Lots and lots of people suddenly started using them. And it went from probably no customers, because it did not exist, to maybe 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million, a billion over months or few years. But as I said, the risk is also very high because you're doing something, and if you're not absolutely sure, you will fail. But a traditional business, it may not grow very fast, but because there are already existing demand for that product or that service, it may not fail. It may not grow very fast, but it will probably not fail as well. Funding requirements are very different. So if you start a micro business with say 1 crore capital or 50 lakhs capital or 10 lakhs capital, you can start with that capital and every year you may just bring in another 10% or 20% more because you're growing at that rate. But a startup, because it's growing so fast, if it needs a 1 crore today, next year it may need 10 crores. The year after it may need 100 crores. The year after you may need 1,000 crore. And you will read about how startups like Zomato or Swiggy or Paytm, they raised billions and billions of dollars to fund their growth. And then you will look at in terms of frameworks of regulation and operations. Because startups is doing very new things, a lot of times the existing legal framework is not equipped to handle that. For example, the privacy concerns, data privacy concerns, okay, of the social media platforms, Facebook or Instagram, or the tech platforms like Google. In a traditional business, there isn't probably as much of privacy concerns. And the laws are not equipped to handle that kind of privacy requirements or violations or compliance. But because when new technologies emerge and many people use those technologies, different kind of laws may be required. Now let's look at two different kinds of startups. One of them, as I said, is a market pull startup, and one was tech push. So if you look at market pull, let's look at Airbnb or OYO in India. It started with a need in the market. So there are empty houses. People have houses which are empty for some of the year, and there are tourists who are looking for a place to stay. Typically, the tourists would go to a hotel. But the hotels can be expensive or not available. But on the other hand, there are people who have got empty houses. And therefore, maybe there was an opportunity which Airbnb and OYO identified to help the house owner rent their houses or 1 or 2 rooms in their house when they're not needing that room or needing their house. And the tourists could come and stay there. Same with Ola, Uber. There are taxis and vehicles and the drivers, and they are the people who want to ride. But sometimes, and most of the times actually, the passengers don't know where the taxis are, and the taxi drivers don't know where the passengers are. So the passengers are waiting, but the driver is also waiting for a passenger. Then Ola, Uber connected the two. Book My Show. A lot of times, moviegoers or event goers would go to a movie hall but go and find out there are no tickets. Or they don't know all the movies that's running in town or all the events that's going on in a town. And then a platform like Book My Show will come. It did come. And in Book My Show, you can actually look at all the movies and all the events that are there. You can pick and choose. And you can book in advance. Same with Make My Trip. A lot of times you don't know what are the flight options. So if you go to maybe in India, an Indigo office or a Vistara office or Air India office, or internationally, you have to go to a British Airways or a Lufthansa or a Emirates or Singapore Airlines offices to find out what are the flights and what are the availabilities and what are the prices. But in a platform like make my trip, you can look at all the flight options and the prices, and you can book at home. Same with Flipkart or Amazon, e-commerce. Same with delivery services. There are many restaurants, but you don't know which are all the restaurants, what are the menus, what are the prices, and sometimes when you go there, the restaurant doesn't have a table. But with Swiggy and Zomato, especially when COVID happened and people are locked up in their rooms, Swiggy and Zomato and many others delivered food at home. And they've got quick commerce now. You can order in 10 minutes. The point being that there are customer needs which maybe even the customers don't know. Think about it. The restaurants never figured out that they could deliver at home and put all the menus up and people could order from home till Swiggy and Zomato came around. Cinema owners never thought that their tickets could be sold and people could buy sitting at their homes. But then Book My Show came through. The malls, when they came up, never thought that their customers could actually buy the same products sitting at their homes. And the malls got disrupted by Flipkart and Amazon or Mantra or any of those e-commerce platforms. So there is a customer need. The customers sometimes don't know that they have this need. And then when the startup comes, they discover that need and say, oh wow, it's so convenient. Existing business don't know what the needs are, but there is a need. And the startups which meet those needs are market pull ventures. So they start with a market problem and they work backwards to identify technology to solve that problem. So think about Tesla, or any of the electric vehicles, the Tata electric vehicles. So pollution is a big problem in countries like India, actually globally. And companies like Tesla, then Byte, and then Tata's, they started building electric vehicles. So they started with a market problem, emission, pollution, and they worked backwards to create clean, green cars, or at least cleaner, greener cars. Now, because this market pull ventures start with a market problem, generally if they can develop the right solution, the risks are lower. The risks are much higher than a traditional MSME, but it is still lower than a tech push, which we'll see later, startups. And because they go step by step, the funding is also milestone based. And as I gave a lot of examples, these are typically market pull ones in consumer goods, consumer services, and agriculture, etc. So these are market pull new ventures. Moving on, let's look at technology push ventures. As the name suggests, it actually doesn't start with a market need. It starts in an academic institution, like I said before, IIT, MIT, Stanford, etc. And these are probably academicians or heads of laboratories who are developing a technology. It could also be a company R&D who's developing a state-of-the-art technology. These technologies may take years to develop. But at a certain point in time, once the technology is reasonably mature, after years, after maybe hundreds of crores, billions of dollars of funding, the company or the research lab may convert the technology into a product. So what are some examples? If you look at ChatGPT, those AI models, LLMs or other AI models, may have taken years to develop. But when it came to the market, millions and hundreds of millions of people quickly started using ChatGPT. Same with the mRNA vaccine. It was mRNA vaccines took years to develop, and it was in the research stage. Well, when COVID hit, billions of people used that technology, and it became a very big product. Space, a spacecraft, India's space missions or NASA, they take years to build a satellite or a rocket. And then it becomes a product and it's launched in the market. The customer may be a government, the customer may be a company, the customer may be an army. For example, battle tanks or a new kind of radar, a new kind of drone. The customer is army or the police. It may have taken years to develop, but then when it becomes a product, a lot of people buy it. Another case is pharma, molecules or medicines. A medicine for cancer, or earlier on for diabetes or blood pressure or cholesterol. Those would have taken years to develop. Billions of dollars of research, and then billions of dollars of clinical testing, because medicines have to be safe. And then it was launched in the market. And therefore the profile of these startups, but it could also be an existing company, but a division within an existing company. We'll look at some examples in a while. The profile of these startups, whether standalone or as part of a bigger company or in a university or in a government lab, they absorb and they need a lot of capital upfront. Years. And then they don't look at what is the use when they first start the research. But as the research matures, as the technology matures, then the users start coming up. And then they productivize, and then it comes out to the market. So these are typical technology push startups or ventures. And if you are doing a technology startup, you need to figure out whether you will work market backwards, which means you identify a market need, or you already have a technology because you are a researcher, a PhD student or an MTech student, and you have some technology, you want to push it out in the market. So there are many companies like Gartner, many of the consulting companies, many of the global universities have websites like MIT Technology Review, IIT Bombay, and many of the IITs publish their research. And you can see different technologies that are coming out. Some of you may be working on these technologies at the cutting edge. Some of you may want to study this technology, try to license it, and build a startup around it. So Gartner is a company which shows the evolution or the maturity of different kinds of technologies around the world. They publish it yearly, and if you look at the phases that they have, at the bottom you'll see that is it very early stage, or is it more mature, or is it dying? And on the left side, you can see how the adoption is moving on. So in this particular slide, I urge you to look at it and look at different kinds of technologies, starting from AI to physical technologies. Which part of the hype cycle are they in? Let's look at some examples of really disruptive products and services. Let's start with disruptive products. So in the early 2000s, Apple iPod came as a disruptive product because earlier you had to store your music in tapes or CDs or DVDs, and you need a player for that. Or you had devices with small capacities which stored some music. And then iPod came, and you could carry almost an entire music library in your pocket. And then the iPhone came, because that became an all-in-one device. It was a phone, it was a music player, it was an entertainment center. You could also do productivity work. And suddenly iPhone came, and it disrupted the Nokia key phones. Similarly, if you go down history, the digital cameras from Sony and some of these companies disrupted the market-leading Kodak, which was doing film cameras. And then if you look at companies like GoPro, which created a camera for very fast-moving action versus a normal digital or a video camera. So some of you who go trekking, mountaineering, or adventure sports will probably look at things like GoPro. So these are all product disruptions. And if you look at service disruptions, in India, there are many. I've already talked about e-commerce, where you could sit at home and buy millions of products. Versus if you went to a small store, they'll probably have a few thousand products. If you went to the mall or a hypermarket or supermarket in the mall, they'll probably have 20,000 products or 100,000 products. It's a very big store. But Amazon or Flipkart, Myntra, any of those will probably have millions of products, all from the convenience of sitting at home. Then I've already talked about service disruptions like Uber and so on. You can look up some of them on the screen. One of the biggest, of course, which most of you will probably use, is the UPI innovation. Because in India, probably more than any other country, you can pay anybody. You can pay your friend, your family, a small vendor, a kirana store. When you get your haircut, the salon, you could pay, you could buy vegetables, you could pay the taxi driver through UPI exchange. And it suddenly disrupted this whole cash payment and use of credit cards. And I've already talked about service disruptions like Book My Show and Make My Trip and so on. But all of these were disruptive startups. I've already talked about deep tech startups, some of them, and there's some more on the screen. I've talked about mRNA vaccine, Moderna, SpaceX. Imagine a company which is doing space tourism. They could actually go up as a tourist to space and come back. Maybe somebody will go to Moon or Mars as a tourist and come back. ChatGPT, I hope all of you are using it. I encourage all of you to use one of the AI tools. But a tool that is so easy to use in your phone, the underlying technology would have taken years and billions of dollars of funding to have been developed. But once it's developed, billions of people are using it. Many of you have bought cryptocurrency, or even if you have not bought, you would have heard about cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, etc. These are also alternative money forms and extremely disruptive, but it took years to develop the blockchaining and the distributed ledger and some of the underlying technology of a cryptocurrency. Quantum computing, which takes computing, which means your computers that you're using today, or computers that businesses are using to a whole different level of computing. But this technology has been developed and is being developed over years and decades. But hopefully, as it becomes adopted fast, maybe government, defense, academic institutions, but at some point in time, in some form, it will come to consumer applications. You can probably do things with a handheld quantum computer, consumer device, which is got quantum computing underlying it. And you can do things which have never been able to do before. These are deep tech examples. Again, now I'd like you to reflect for 3 minutes on 2 or 3 technology startups that you use regularly. It could be Zomato or Swiggy. It could be, as I said, any of the booking portals. It could be e-commerce portal. It could be an entertainment portal like Netflix. Think about those technology startups and try to think about or research who started them, how did they start, what are the traditional businesses that they disrupted, and write it down in a course journal. And as you start thinking about it, hopefully you will start developing your own entrepreneurial mindset. So please reflect for 3 minutes.